All right, let's dive into the ancient world.
Sounds good to me.
Today, we're going way back to the prehistoric cultures of India.
Really fascinating stuff.
We've got some incredible material to work with for this deep dive. We have excerpts from Bharatiya Puraitihasik Prastave.
Which, for those who don't know, translates to Indian prehistoric archaeology.
Right. It seems to be like the book on the subject.
It's a really comprehensive text, yeah.
Plus, we have these maps and charts, really detailed
Yeah,
ones.
they're great for visualizing the different cultural phases and how they spread across India over time.
Really helpful for wrapping your head around it all. So these sources.
They really challenge those old assumptions about how old Indian civilization actually is.
Yeah, I was surprised to learn how recent people thought it was until fairly recently.
For a long time, people thought it was much younger than it actually is.
The book mentions that everything changed in 1922.
That's when they discovered the Indus Valley Civilization.
Right. It totally revolutionized our understanding of the timeline, pushing it way back.
At least to 3000 BCE, maybe even further back. It's incredible to think about.
Really makes you realize how much archaeology can reveal about the past. One thing that struck me reading this book was how much it emphasizes the role of geography and the natural environment in shaping these cultures.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. The land itself really influences where people settle and how they live.
Right, of course.
Like the book talks about these two major geographic regions in India.
Oh, interesting. What are they?
The first one includes areas like Sindh, Punjab, and Rajasthan. They're generally drier regions.
Okay.
And then the second one, well, that covers pretty much the rest of India. Much more varied landscapes there.
So, with these different regions, did they develop totally distinct cultures?
Well, they each had their own unique characteristics for sure.
That makes sense.
Think about it. You've got the Himalayas in the north, this massive natural barrier.
Right.
And then in the south, you have the Deccan Plateau, this huge elevated area. And all throughout the subcontinent, you've got these major rivers, the Indus, the Ganges flowing through. These geographical features really played a huge role in how different groups were connected, or in some cases, isolated from each other. And of course, they were essential for resources.
So, each region is like its own little world in a way. It's fascinating.
Exactly.
And speaking of fascinating, I was captivated by the section on the pre-Harappan cultures, the ones that came before the Indus Valley Civilization.
Oh, yeah, those are some of the earliest cultures we're talking about, in places like Baluchistan and Sindh, thousands of years old.
They really had their own unique thing going on.
They did. Archaeologists have been able to piece together a lot about them, mainly through their pottery.
The book has some amazing illustrations of that pottery.
Those illustrations are fantastic. You can see the different styles so clearly.
I was really drawn to these intricate designs. Some of the pottery was covered, every inch of it.
Oh, yeah. They were big on that. It's called horror vacui.
Horror vacui, what's that?
It means fear of empty space. Basically, they felt this need to fill every little bit of space with designs and patterns.
Interesting. I wonder what the meaning behind that was.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's a pattern you see in other early cultures around the world too.
Huh. So how do archaeologists even begin to date these pre-Harappan cultures? It seems really challenging.
It is. It's not like they had calendars we can just reference.
Right.
A lot of it comes down to relative chronology. So they look at the different layers of Earth where artifacts are found.
Like the deeper down, the older it is.
Exactly. It's like a layer cake of history.
Right.
By comparing the styles of artifacts found in each layer, they can start to understand the sequence of events.
Okay, so it's less about finding a specific date and more about figuring out what came before what.
Exactly. Precise dating is tough, especially for those really early periods, because we often don't have things like written records or coins that can be directly dated.
Makes sense. Okay, let's move on to the Indus Valley Civilization, or as the book calls it, the Harappan culture. One thing that really stands out is just how huge it was geographically.
It really was massive, stretching all the way from what's now Pakistan through parts of western and northern India. The maps we have really show you just how much ground they covered.
And they weren't just spread out. Their cities were incredibly advanced for their time, especially their urban planning.
Their city planning was light years ahead of its time. It's remarkable how they were able to create these well-organized urban centers.
The book talks about them using standardized brick sizes, which is wild.
I know, right? And then you have their drainage systems, which were so complex and sophisticated.
Way ahead of their time. And we can't forget about those beautiful seals.
Their craftsmanship was incredible. They were using all sorts of materials, terracotta, steatite, even copper.
It really shows a high level of skill and organization. And then there's the Indus script, this mysterious writing system.
Oh yeah, that's a real head-scratcher. It's like a code that archaeologists have been trying to crack for, like, forever.
I can't even imagine trying to decipher something like that.
Well, it's found on seals, pottery, all sorts of objects. But so far, no one's been able to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest mysteries of the Indus Valley Civilization.
It really deepens the intrigue, that's for sure. And speaking of mysteries, we have to talk about the decline of the Indus Valley Civilization. It's another big question mark, isn't it?
It is, and there's no simple answer. It wasn't like something catastrophic happened overnight and boom, they were gone. It wasn't a sudden collapse, more like a gradual decline. Probably a lot of factors at play.
So what are some of the leading theories about what happened?
Well, one of the big ones is climate change.
Yeah.
The Indus people, they really relied on the monsoon rains for their agriculture. Any major shifts in weather patterns could have been devastating.
That makes sense. If the rains failed, their crops would have failed.
Exactly. It would put a huge strain on their food supply and resources in general.
So environmental changes could have been a major factor. Were there other things that might have contributed?
Possibly. Some scholars point to ecological degradation. Things like overgrazing, deforestation, maybe even natural disasters like earthquakes could have disrupted their way of life.
It's often not just one single thing, but a combination of factors that lead to these kinds of big historical shifts.
Right, like a perfect storm.
So after the decline of the Harappan civilization, the book moves on to these other really interesting cultures that emerged.
This is what we call the Chalcolithic period, basically means copperstone. And it saw a real blossoming of diverse cultures all across India.
So they were using copper more extensively during this time.
Exactly. It was a time of experimentation with metalworking. But it wasn't just about tools and technology. We see all these unique expressions of culture in their pottery, their houses, even their burial practices.
It's amazing how much we can learn from those things.
It really is. Archaeology is like detective work.
So during this Chalcolithic period, who were some of the major players?
Well, you've got the Ahar culture in southeast Rajasthan. They were known for their black and red pottery. Very distinctive style.
I remember seeing pictures of that in the book.
Then there's the Malwa culture in central India. They loved their painted pottery. Lots of geometric designs.
Cool.
And then, of course, you have the Jorwi culture up in Maharashtra. They're known for those spouted vessels they made and for decorating their pottery with animal motifs.
Each one sounds so unique.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
Each of these cultures had its own distinct style, its own traditions, its own way of adapting to the environment.
It sounds like the Chalcolithic period was a time of real innovation and change in India.
Absolutely. It really laid the groundwork for the traditions and cultures that would come later.
It's a good reminder that Indian civilization wasn't just this single straight line of development.
Not at all. It's more like this intricate tapestry with all these different threads woven together.
I like that analogy. So speaking of transitions, the shift from the Chalcolithic to the Iron Age must have been a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about a massive technological leap right around 1200 BCE. Just like the shift from bronze to iron in other parts of the ancient world, this really revolutionized society in India.
It makes sense. Iron tools, iron weapons, it changes everything.
Completely.
Right.
And it's not just about having stronger, more durable materials. It's about the ripple effect it has on every aspect of life.
So the book talks about the painted grayware culture during this period. What made them so special?
Their pottery, for one thing. It's amazing. They decorated it with these black geometric patterns on a gray background. Really striking. And they were using iron tools and weapons, which would have given them a real advantage.
Makes sense. They'd be able to farm more efficiently, and I'm guessing they'd have the upper hand in any conflicts, too.
Exactly. Now, where this iron technology came from is actually a bit of a debate.
Oh, really? I just assumed they developed it themselves.
Some scholars believe that it was an indigenous development, but others think it might have spread to India from West Asia, what we call diffusion.
So either they figured it out on their own or they learned it from someone else.
Precisely. The book actually leans towards the diffusion theory. They point to similarities between iron artifacts found in both regions, and the timing lines up as well.
So it's still a mystery.
It is. But regardless of how it got there, the arrival of ironworking had a huge impact on ancient India.
It makes you think about how these seemingly small technological advancements can have such massive consequences.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Iron tools meant they could clear forests for agriculture much more easily. Iron weapons changed the dynamics of warfare. It wasn't just about a new type of metal, it was a whole new way of life.
It's amazing how these things ripple through history. It's like what we were talking about before. Archaeology isn't just about what happened in the past, but why it matters, how it led to the world we live in today.
Exactly. That's why context is so important. You can't just look at an artifact in isolation. You have to understand the environment it came from, its purpose, how it relates to other objects and cultures.
It's all connected.
Exactly. And speaking of fascinating artifacts, we have to talk about the copper hoards.
Oh, yes! The copper hoards. What are those exactly?
They're one of the biggest mysteries in Indian archaeology. Imagine finding these collections of copper objects, sometimes hundreds of them, all buried together.
Like a hidden treasure. Where are they found?
Mostly in the Gangetic Plains. They date back to the copper hoard culture, roughly from 1800 to 1000 BCE. So this overlaps with the late Harappan and early Iron Age periods.
So we're talking about a time of significant change and transition.
Exactly. And these hoards, they offer a fascinating glimpse into that era, into the skills, and maybe even the beliefs of the people who created them.
What kind of things are we talking about? What's in these copper hoards?
All sorts of things. Flat axes, harpoons, these really interesting anthropomorphic figures, swords, tools, weapons, all made of copper.
Wow, and they were all buried together. Why?
That's the million-dollar question. And honestly, no one knows for sure.
Really? There are no theories.
There are theories, plenty of them, but no definitive answers.
So we've got all these theories, but it sounds like we're still trying to put the puzzle together when it comes to the copper hoards.
It really is like a giant jigsaw puzzle, isn't it? We have these pieces, these incredible artifacts, but figuring out the bigger picture, why they were buried, who buried them, that's the real challenge. And every now and then, a new discovery throws a wrench in everything.
That's what I love about archaeology, though. It's constantly evolving. We're always learning something new, challenging our old assumptions. This whole deep dive has really highlighted just how much more there is to uncover about prehistoric India.
Oh, absolutely. We've just scratched the surface. There are so many unanswered questions, so many avenues for future research.
So where do we go from here? What are some of the most exciting areas of research for understanding prehistoric India, in your view?
One thing that really fascinates me is the interaction between different cultures in the ancient world. Like, we've touched on the connections between the Indus Valley Civilization and Mesopotamia, but how deep did those connections go?
It makes you wonder, was it just trading, or were there deeper cultural exchanges happening?
Exactly. And did people migrate between these regions? There's so much we still don't know, and unraveling those connections could completely change how we understand both civilizations.
It's like we're tracing these ancient highways of ideas and people moving across continents, connecting these different parts of the world. Incredible.
And it's not just about external connections either. Understanding the relationships between different groups within India is crucial.
Oh, right. Because it wasn't one big homogeneous culture, was it?
Not at all. For example, the book mentions the megalithic cultures of South India.
Those are the ones with the impressive stone structures, right?
Exactly. They were emerging around the same time as the copper hoard culture up north.
Mm.
And we still have so much to learn about them, their origins, their beliefs, how they were connected to other cultures.
It's a good reminder of how diverse India was, even thousands of years ago. All these different cultures interacting and influencing each other.
Absolutely. And this diversity isn't just geographic, it's methodological too. Archaeology today goes beyond just digging up artifacts.
Right. It's about using all sorts of different techniques and drawing on knowledge from other fields to get a more complete picture of the past.
Exactly. We've got things like archaeobotany, archaeozoology, using ancient plant and animal remains to understand things like diet, the environment, how people were interacting with their surroundings.
It's amazing how much information we can get from those things.
It's incredible. And we can't forget the impact of technology. Tools like DNA analysis are revolutionizing archaeology.
So we can actually trace ancient migration patterns through DNA. That's wild.
It is. And new dating methods are helping us refine timelines and understand events with much greater accuracy. It's a really exciting time to be studying the past.
It sounds like archaeology is really becoming this incredibly interdisciplinary field, combining science, history, and a whole lot of detective work.
You got it. It takes scientific rigor, historical inquiry, and, a bit of imagination to put all the pieces together. But that's what makes it so rewarding.
I have to say, this deep dive has been quite a journey. I feel like I've learned so much about prehistoric India, but more importantly, it sparked a curiosity in me to learn even more.
That's what we like to hear. That's what it's all about, igniting that sense of wonder and encouraging people to keep exploring these fascinating cultures and their mysteries.
Well, I think it's safe to say mission accomplished. Until next time.